They tell you that war is hell, but they lie. Hell has rules. Hell has a hierarchy. Hell has a devil you can bargain with. What we faced in the silent zone wasn't hell. It was a vacuum where the laws of physics had been politely asked to step outside and wait. I am Captain Alara Vance, and I am here to tell you that the most dangerous weapon in any army isn't a railgun or a drone swarm. It's an order that asks you to break the fundamental constants of reality to save the people who gave it to you. If you think you know what sacrifice means, if you think you understand the weight of uniform, you haven't stood on the edge of a collapsing timeline and watched your best friend fade from existence because the math said he had to. This isn't a story about winning. It's a story about surviving the cost of victory when the bill comes due in memories you can no longer keep. Listen closely. The universe is listening too, and it doesn't like being corrected. The rain didn't fall down. It fell sideways, suspended in a gelatinous haze that smelled of ozone and burnt copper. I watched a single droplet hang in the air, inches from my visor, reflecting the distorted, jagged skyline of Sector 4. It was beautiful, in the way a car crash is beautiful before you realize someone is inside. Captain, Miller's voice crackled in my ear, stripped of its usual warmth by the static interference that plagued this entire damn zone. Readings are spiking again. The local gravity, well, is shifting. If we don't move now, we're going to be flattened into two-dimensional art. I blinked, forcing my eyes to focus on the heads-up display projected onto my retinal lens. The numbers were red, bleeding into each other. Gravity, 1.4 GS, and rising. Temporal stability, critical. Reality cohesion, 82%. Copy that, Miller, I said, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart against my ribs. Jax, status on the breach charge? Primed and ready, Cap, Jax replied. He was our demolitions expert, a man who treated explosives with the tenderness most people reserve for newborns. I could hear the click of his tools in the background, a rhythmic, comforting sound in the chaos. But I'm telling you, this door isn't just locked. It's confused. The molecular structure is oscillating. If I blow it, I might blow us into next Tuesday. Or last Thursday. Just make a hole, Jax, I said, checking the charge on my pulse rifle. We don't have time for poetry. Poetry keeps you sane, Cap, Jax muttered. You should try it sometime. I ignored him, turning my attention to the rest of the squad. We were huddled in the ruins of what used to be a subway station, the tiles cracked and covered in that strange iridescent moss that grew only in areas where space-time had been torn open. There was Miller, our tech specialist, hunched over his datapad, his fingers flying across the virtual keyboard as he tried to hack the local network nodes that shouldn't exist. There was Jax, kneeling by the sealed blast door, his face illuminated by the soft blue glow of his detonator. And there was Kale, our medic, sitting quietly in the corner, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. Kale didn't say much. He didn't need to. His presence was an anchor, a reminder that despite the madness outside, we were still human, still biological, still mortal. Alara, Miller said, using my first name. He only did that when things were bad. Really bad. I've decoded the transmission from command. It's not just a rescue mission anymore. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. What is it then? It's a containment protocol, Miller said, looking up. His eyes were wide, terrified. The anomaly in the center of the sector, it's not natural. It's a weapon. A Class 9 chronodisplacement device. And it's active. A silence fell over the group, heavier than the gravity pressing down on us. A Class 9 device. We had trained for these, theoretically, in simulations, in classrooms with sterile white walls and holographic diagrams. But theory didn't account for the smell of ozone, or the way the light bent around corners, or the feeling that your own memories were slipping through your fingers like sand. Command knows? I asked. They ordered us in, Miller said. They knew. They sent us in to stabilize the core, so they could extract the data. We're not rescuing survivors, Alara. We're securing evidence. The anger hit me then, hot and sharp. We had been told there were civilians trapped in the sector. Families. Children. We had rushed in, hearts pounding, ready to pull them from the jaws of disaster. And now we were told it was all a lie. A trap. A cleanup operation. Cap, Jack said, standing up. He held the detonator in his hand, his knuckles white. If this is a trap, we walk away. Right now. We blow the exit and we leave. Let them deal with their own mess. We can't, I said, my voice low. If that device goes critical, it won't just destroy this sector. It'll unravel the timeline for the entire city. Millions of people, including our families. So we die for their mistake? Kale asked, finally, speaking. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. A challenge. We survive, I said, meeting his gaze. And we stop it. Not for command. For everyone else. Miller, can you bypass the security protocols on the core? Miller hesitated, then nodded. Maybe, if I can get close enough. But the radiation levels, they're not just radioactive. They're chronal. Time radiation. If I stay in there too long, I'll age. Or de-age. Or just cease to have ever existed. Then we do it fast, I said. Jax, blow the door. Kale, keep us covered. Miller, stick to me. We move in 3, 2, 1. Jax pressed the button. The explosion wasn't loud. It was a sigh, a release of pressure that sucked the air out of the room before blasting it back in. The blast door didn't fly off its hinges. It dissolved, turning into a cloud of metallic dust that hung in the air like glitter. Beyond it lay a corridor that stretched into infinity, the walls pulsing with a faint, violet light. Move, I ordered, stepping into the corridor. The moment we crossed the threshold, the world changed. The gravity shifted again, pulling us toward the ceiling. I activated the mag boots on my suit, locking us to the floor, or what passed for it. The air was thick, viscous, hard to breathe. My lungs burned with every inhale. Stay close, I said, my voice echoing strangely, as if spoken by multiple people at once. Don't touch the walls. Don't look directly at the light sources. And, for God's sake, don't think about anything too hard. The anomaly feeds on cognitive load. Feeds on thoughts. Jax asked, his voice trembling slightly. You're kidding, right? I wish I was, I said. Keep your minds empty. Focus on breathing. Focus on the mission. Nothing else. We moved forward, step by careful step. The corridor seemed to stretch and contract, playing tricks on our depth perception. Shadows detached themselves from objects and danced along the walls. I saw things out of the corner of my eye, faces of people I knew, dead and alive, smiling, screaming, crying. I shook my head, forcing them away. Focus. Breathe. Move. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, we reached the central chamber. It was a vast, spherical room, the walls lined with complex machinery that hummed with a low, menacing thrum. In the center floated the core, a sphere of pure, swirling energy, black and white, and every color in between. It was beautiful and terrifying. There, Miller whispered, pointing to a console on the far side of the room. That's the control interface. Cover me, I said, moving toward the console. As I approached, the air grew colder. My breath misted in front of my visor. The humming grew louder, vibrating in my bones. I could feel the weight of the anomaly pressing against my mind, trying to pry open my thoughts to feed on my fears. I thought of my sister, waiting for me back home. I thought of the promise I made to her that I'd come back. I pushed those thoughts away, burying them deep. Empty, empty, empty. I reached the console and plugged in my datapad. Miller joined me, his hands shaking as he began to type. Hurry, I said, scanning the room. The shadows were getting closer. They weren't just shadows anymore. They were forming shapes. Human shapes. I'm trying. Miller snapped. The code is changing. It's adapting to my inputs. Adapting? I asked. It's learning, Miller said, his voice rising in panic. It knows we're here. It knows what we're trying to do. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered and died. The only illumination came from the core, which pulsed with a violent, erratic rhythm. From the darkness, figures emerged. They wore our uniforms. They had our faces. Alara, one of them said. It was me, or a version of me. Her eyes were hollow, black pits. Why do you fight? It's easier to let go. I raised my rifle, but my finger hovered over the trigger. I couldn't shoot myself. Could I? Don't look at them. I shouted to the team. They're illusions, projections of your subconscious. But they feel real, Jack said, his voice distant. I turned to see him staring at a figure that looked like his brother, who had died in the war 5 years ago. The figure was holding out a hand, smiling. Jax, snap out of it, I yelled, rushing toward him. But before I could reach him, the figure grabbed Jax's arm. And then Jack screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain, but of erasure. His body began to fade, turning transparent, dissolving into the air. No. I lunged, grabbing his other arm, trying to hold him to this reality. But my hands passed through him. He looked at me, his eyes filled with sorrow, and then he was gone. "Jax!" Cale shouted, firing his rifle at the illusion. The bullets passed through harmlessly. "He's gone," Miller said, his voice flat. Shocked. "He's just gone." I stood there, my hand still reaching for empty air. The grief hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. But there was no time to mourn. The core was pulsing faster, the vibrations shaking the floor. "We have to finish this," I said, my voice cracking. "For Jax." Miller nodded, tears streaming down his face behind his visor. He turned back to the console, his fingers moving with renewed urgency. "I've got it. About the override code. But, Alara, there's a problem." "What problem?" "To stabilize the core, someone has to manually hold the containment field open while I upload the virus. It's a two-person job. One to code, one to hold." "I'll do it," I said immediately. "No," Miller said. "The radiation, it's too high. You're the captain. You need to lead the team out." "I'll do it." "Miller, no. It's the only way," he said, looking at me. There was a peace in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Tell my mom I love her. And tell her I didn't suffer." Before I could argue, he shoved me back and slammed his hand onto the manual override lever. A shield of energy erupted around him, holding the core's chaotic energy at bay. "Go," he screamed. "Get out. Now." Cale grabbed my arm, dragging me back toward the entrance. I wanted to stay. I wanted to help him. But I knew he was right. If I stayed, we both died. And the mission failed. We ran. We ran through the dissolving corridor, past the dancing shadows, past the memories that tried to trap us. Behind us, I heard Miller scream, cut short by a blinding flash of light. And then silence. We burst out of the subway station and into the rain. The sideways rain. The gravity normalized. The sky was gray, ordinary, mundane. I fell to my knees, gasping for air. Cale stood over me, his chest heaving. We were alive. But Jax was gone. Miller was gone. And I had a feeling that this was only the beginning. The debriefing room was sterile, white, and silent. Too silent. I sat at the metal table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Across from me sat General Holloway, a man whose face was a map of wrinkles and scars, each one earned in a war I was too young to remember. He didn't look at me. He looked at the file in front of him. "Captain Vance," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Your report is inconsistent." "Inconsistent, sir?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Inside, I was burning. Inconsistent? I had just lost 2 men. 2 good men. And he was worried about paperwork? "You state that Specialist Jax and Technician Miller were lost due to anomalous temporal fluctuations," Holloway said, finally, looking up. His eyes were cold, calculating. "However, our sensors detected no such fluctuations in Sector 4. In fact, according to our logs, Sector 4 was cleared of all hostiles and anomalies 3 days ago." I stared at him. 3 days ago? "Sir, we were just there. We just came back. Jax and Miller died less than an hour ago." Holloway sighed, closing the file. "Captain, you've been under a lot of stress. The mission in Sector 4 was a simulation, a training exercise. You and Sergeant Cale completed it successfully. There were no casualties. I felt the blood drain from my face. A simulation? No, that wasn't a simulation. I felt the gravity shift. I saw Jax fade away. I heard Miller scream. That was real. Was it?" Holloway asked. "Or was it a manifestation of your guilt? Your fear of failure?" "The psyche is a powerful thing, Captain. It can create realities that feel more real than reality itself." I stood up, slamming my hands on the table. "I am not crazy, sir. I know what I saw. I know what I felt." "Sit down, Captain," Holloway said, his voice hardening. "That is an order." He said. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to breathe. To think, if this was a simulation, why did I still have the burn marks on my gloves from the console? Why did I still smell the ozone? "Dismissed," Holloway said. "Report to medical for a psychological evaluation. And, Captain, try to get some rest. You look terrible." I walked out of the room, my mind racing. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. I needed to talk to Cale. He had been there with me. He had seen it too. I found Cale in the barracks, sitting on his bunk, staring at the wall. He looked as shaken as I felt. "Cale," I said softly. He didn't turn around. Did he tell you it was a simulation? Yes, I said. He told me the same thing, Cale said. He said I imagined it, that I cracked under pressure. But we both know it was real, I said. Cale turned to look at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. Were we? Alara, what if he's right? What if we did imagine it? What if Jax and Miller are alive, and we're just broken? No, I said firmly. I checked my gear. The burn marks are real. The ozone smell is real. And I checked the mission logs. They've been altered. Someone wiped the real data and replaced it with a fake simulation record. Cale frowned. Who? And why? That's what we need to find out, I said. But we have to be careful. If Holloway knows we're questioning the narrative, he'll have us locked up. Or worse. What do you suggest? We go back, I said. Back to Sector 4? Cale asked, incredulous. It's a restricted zone now, guarded by MPs. Not the physical sector, I said. The digital one. Miller left a backdoor in the system before he died. He told me about it once, as a joke. Said he always left a way out. If we can access that backdoor, we can see the original logs. We can prove what happened. And if we can't, then we're crazy, I said, and we deserve to be locked up. Cale studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Okay, but how do we get into the server room without being seen? I have a plan, I said. But it's risky. Isn't it always? Cale smiled. I faint. Such smile. Lead the way, Cap. Getting into the server room was easier than I expected. Too easy. The guards were distracted, talking about a football game. The security cameras were looping. It was as if someone wanted us to get in. Once inside, I jacked into the terminal, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Cale stood by the door, watching for anyone who might come. Found it, I whispered. Miller's back door. It's hidden in the subroutines of the weather control system. Clever bastard. I accessed the file, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The logs weren't just altered. They were erased. Completely. There was no record of our mission. No record of Jax or Miller ever entering Sector 4. But there's something else. A video file, timestamped from 10 minutes after we exited the sector. I played it. The screen showed the interior of the central chamber. But it wasn't empty. Miller was there. Alive. He was standing by the console, typing furiously. And Jax was there too, helping him hold the containment field. What? Cale breathed, coming closer to look. On the screen, Miller looked up, directly at the camera. His lips moved, but there was no audio. He pointed at something off-screen. Then, the video cut to black. They're alive, Cale said, his voice trembling with hope. They're alive, Alara. But why hide it? I asked. Why tell us they're dead? Maybe they're not dead, Cale said. Maybe they're somewhere else. Somewhere Command doesn't want us to know about. I scrolled through the rest of the files. There were dozens of them. Videos of other soldiers. Other missions. All erased. All hidden. This isn't just about us, I said. This is a pattern. Command is hiding something big. Something involving the anomalies. Suddenly, the lights in the server room flickered. The door slid open, and General Holloway stepped in, flanked by 2 armed MPs. I hoped you wouldn't do this, Captain, Holloway said, his voice tired. I really did. Where are they? I demanded, standing up. Where are Jax and Miller? They are safe, Holloway said. For now. Why lie to us? Because the truth would break you, Holloway said. And because the truth is dangerous. The anomalies aren't just weapons, Captain. They're doors. And some things have come through. What things? Holloway didn't answer. He nodded to the MPs. Take them to the brig. Lockdown level 5. As the MPs grabbed my arms, I looked at Cale. He was fighting, kicking, and shouting, but he was outnumbered. Alara, he yelled. Don't let them win. I won't, I promised. They dragged us out, down the long, sterile corridors of the base. But as we passed a window, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. Outside, the sky was purple. The rain was falling upwards. The anomaly wasn't contained. It was spreading, and Holloway knew it. In the brig, I sat on the cold floor, my mind racing. Holloway's words echoed in my head. Some things have come through. What did that mean? And why were Jax and Miller hidden? I closed my eyes, trying to remember Miller's face in the video. He had pointed at something. What was it? I replayed the video in my mind, frame by frame. Miller pointing, off-screen, to the left. There was a symbol on the wall behind him. A symbol I recognized. It was the insignia of Project Ether, a Black Ops project that had been shut down years ago, rumored to be experimenting with time travel. Project Ether wasn't shut down. It was active, and Jax and Miller were part of it. I had to get out. I had to find them, and I had to stop whatever was coming through those doors. But how? I was locked in a cell, guarded by MPs, with no weapons and no allies. Except one. I looked at the vent in the ceiling. It was small, but I was smaller, and I had spent my childhood crawling through spaces like this, escaping my father's anger, escaping my own life. I stood up, stretching my arms. It was time to climb. The vents were tight, dusty, and smelled of old grease and fear. I crawled on my belly, inch by inch, the metal grating digging into my elbows. Every creak of the ductwork sounded like a gunshot in the silence of the night. I could hear the guards below, their voices muffled but distinct. Heard they're going to transfer them to Site X, one said. Site X? That's a one-way ticket, the other replied. Poor bastards. I gritted my teeth. Site X. I had heard the rumors. A black site where soldiers who knew too much went to disappear. I couldn't let that happen. Not to me. Not to Kale. I reached the junction that led to the main server hub. According to the blueprints I had memorized during my initial training, this vent opened directly above the primary cooling unit. If I could drop a grenade into the intake fan, it would cause a system overload, triggering the emergency lockdown release. It was a desperate plan, reckless and dangerous, but it was all I had. I pulled the fragmentation grenade from my belt, stolen from the armory locker I had passed on the way to the brig. My hands were steady now. The fear was still there, but it was buried under a layer of cold, hard determination. I kicked the grate open. It fell with a clang, echoing loudly. Hey, who's there? A guard shouted from below. I didn't hesitate. I pulled the pin and dropped the grenade. Fire in the hole. I yelled, though no one could hear me. I scrambled back just as the explosion rocked the duct. Heat washed over me, followed by the screech of tearing metal. Alarms began to blare, red lights flashing throughout the facility. System failure. Emergency release activated. The cell doors unlocked. I heard shouting, running feet, gunfire. But I was already moving, dropping from the vent into the chaotic hallway below. Smoke filled the air, obscuring vision. I used it to my advantage, slipping through the confusion like a ghost. I needed to get to the hangar. That's where they would take Kale. And that's where I could find a vehicle to get to Site X. I ran, my boots pounding against the concrete. I passed bodies, guards, technicians, anyone caught in the crossfire. I didn't stop. I couldn't. At the hangar bay, I saw Kale being dragged toward a transport shuttle by 4 MPs. He was bruised, bleeding, but still fighting. Kale! I shouted, raising my rifle. The MPs turned, surprised. I fired, not to kill, but to disable. Shots hit the ground near their feet, forcing them to drop Kale and take cover. I sprinted toward him, grabbing his arm. Can you run? Barely, he grunted. Then run. We bolted toward the nearest jeep, jumping in as bullets sparked against the hood. I hotwired it, a skill I had learned in a different life, a different war, and slammed the accelerator. The jeep roared to life, smashing through the hangar doors and out into the night. The sky was still purple. The rain was still falling upwards. The world was unraveling, and we were driving straight into the heart of it. Where are we going? Kale asked, clutching his side. Site X, I said, to get Jax and Miller, and to end this. The drive was a blur of neon lights and distorted landscapes. As we got closer to the coordinates of Site X, the reality around us became more unstable. Trees floated in midair. Roads twisted into impossible loops. Time seemed to skip, jumping forward and backward in stuttering increments. Finally, we reached it. A massive, fortified compound built into the side of a mountain. It was surrounded by a shimmering energy field, the same kind I'd seen in Sector 4. How do we get in? Kale asked. We don't, I said. We knock. I drove the jeep straight at the gate. At the last second, I bailed out, rolling onto the ground. The jeep exploded against the energy field, causing a ripple in the shield. For a split second, it flickered. Now, I yelled. We scrambled through the gap, just as the shield restabilized. Inside, the compound was quiet. Too quiet. We moved through the corridors, weapons raised. The walls were lined with tanks, hundreds of them. Each one contained a soldier. Frozen in time. Alara, Kale whispered, his voice horrified. Look, I looked, and my heart stopped. In one of the tanks was Jax. In another, Miller. They were alive, but suspended, trapped in a bubble of frozen time. And there were others. Dozens of others. Soldiers I recognized. Friends. Comrades. All trapped. This is Project Ether, I said, my voice hollow. They're not just studying the anomalies. They're harvesting them, using soldiers as batteries to power the containment fields. It's monstrous, Kale said. It's necessary, a voice said from the shadows. General Holloway stepped out, holding a tablet. He looked tired, defeated. Necessary? I spat. You're enslaving your own men. To save the world, Holloway said. The anomalies are expanding. Without the energy from these soldiers, the containment fields would fail. The entire timeline would collapse. Billions would die. So you sacrifice the few to save the many? I asked. That's not leadership, General. That's cowardice. Maybe, Holloway said, but it's working. For now. Not for long, I said. The system is unstable. You can see it. The sky is purple. The rain is falling upwards. You're losing control. Holloway sighed. I know. That's why I brought you here. I need your help. You and Kale. You have a unique resistance to the coronal radiation. You can stabilize the core. Permanently. And what happens to Jax and Miller? I asked. They stay, Holloway said. It's the price. No, I said. There's another way. What way? We break the cycle, I said. We destroy the core. Let the anomalies dissipate naturally. It will be chaotic, dangerous, but it will be free. It will kill millions, Holloway said. Or it will save them from a fate worse than death. I countered. Slavery. Lies. A false reality. Holloway looked at me, his eyes searching mine. For a moment, I saw doubt. Regret. Then, he lowered the tablet. Do it. I looked at Kale. He nodded. We moved to the central control room. The core was there, pulsing violently. Jax and Miller were nearby, still trapped in their tanks. I'll free them, Kale said, rushing to the controls. I'll destroy the core, I said. I approached the core, my hand hovering over the self-destruct mechanism. It wasn't a button. It was a choice. A moral event horizon. I thought of Jax's laugh. Miller's kindness. The friends in the tanks. The millions of people outside, living their lives, unaware of the horror beneath their feet. I pressed the button. The world exploded in white light. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a field. The sky was blue. The rain was falling down. Kale was sitting next to me, smiling. Jax and Miller were there too, alive, whole, laughing. Did we win? Jax asked. I looked around. The compound was gone. The tanks were gone. The anomalies were gone. Yes, I said, tears streaming down my face. We won. But as I looked closer, I noticed something. The grass beneath my feet was gray. The sun was cold. And in the distance, I saw a figure watching us. General Holloway. He waved, then faded away. I realized then that we hadn't destroyed the core. We had become it. We were the new containment field. Trapped in a perfect, frozen moment of victory. Forever. It was a small price to pay. For peace. For friendship. For love. I closed my eyes and let the memory hold me.